The Orton effect can give a super real, ethereal glow to your pictures, and it's a really easy effect to undertake, and I often forget that it's there, but I've rediscovered it recently, and I'm going to show you how to do it. So this week we're going to look at the Orton effect. It was introduced by a guy called Michael Orton, who took a sharp picture and an out of focus picture and layered them together, and what that introduced was a degree of glow into the image, and it can be used to really great effect to try and bring out a sort of I think what Nigel Dancer would call a painterly effect on your picture. So let's look at two ways of doing this. So I've taken two pictures, one of them in portrait orientation, one of them in landscape, and they were both taken at my local park. The water lilies are out. It sort of has a Monet type feel to it, but the image is totally sharp and it doesn't quite have that glow that I'm looking for. So to be able to conduct this, you need to be working in Photoshop. So let's open the first image in Photoshop. I do this, I right click, I edit in Photoshop. It's asking me if I want to take the image across using the edits that I've already done, and I want to do that. Okay, so the image is opened up in Photoshop, and this first way really sort of mimics the way that it was originally done using slide film. And so the first thing that you're going to do is you're going to duplicate your image. We can do that with a right click and where it says duplicate layer. Okay, so we're going to duplicate our original image. We're going to do that again. That way, we're going to do that again. Why? Because we're keeping the original image just safe. Now we've got three versions of the same picture, all exactly the same. What we're going to do is we're going to right click and say merge down. What that does is it combines the first two copies together. We're going to duplicate even one more time. And on this version of the image, we're going to apply a Gaussian blur. And what that does is it basically takes the image out of focus. So here we take blur, Gaussian blur. Now for this version you can use any number, but basically we want to get to the point where the image is so out of focus that we can't really see it anymore. So somewhere around there. Okay, so it's about 30. Okay. Now here's a clever bit. We combine the blending mode from normal and we change that to multiply. So now we've hit multiply, we can sort of really see very little now of the image. But what we can do is we can change the opacity of the top level, the out of focus bit, and bring it back to a point where we've got an effect on the image. And I think we're going to use sort of about there. So about 30 odd opacity. I'm reasonably happy that there's some glow coming back through the out of focus level. We're going to be able to still see most of the sharpness of the original image. But it's now a little bit dark. It's lost some of its original brightness. So what we can do is, going back to the first sharp version, the merged down copies, is we can add a layer. So a new adjustment layer, we're going to use levels. Now it's important here that we're just going to apply it to the sharp layer. So use the previous layer to create the clipping mask. So that's going in here, and you can see here's our histogram, And what I'm going to do is going to be able to bring up the brights a little bit. And that's it, quite happy with that one. So I'm going to save it and go back to the original. And now what we see is that our Orton version has a more painterly feel to it. So that's the first one. A little bit long-winded, so I'm going to show you a version which I learnt from Thomas Heaton fairly recently, and it's sort of quicker and easier, and I think you're going to enjoy that one a little bit more. Again, we're going to open the file in Photoshop. Okay, so we've opened our image in Photoshop. I'm going to start in the same way as we did last time. Is we're going to duplicate the bottom layer, the original image, and this time we're going to go straight to our Gaussian blur. Again, the same sort of level, but you'll notice that this time the image doesn't seem as dark as what we saw in the first version. And how we add that level of crunch, we add a lot of contrast into the image, and that was originally affected by having this multiple levels of slide film layered on top of each other. This time we're going to add an adjustment level to the out of focus image. And here we're going to slide going past the highlights, and we're going to sort of scrunch this down so it becomes very contrasty. Okay, again, it was important to affect just the previous layer rather than the whole of the Photoshop image. But now what we can do is we can reduce the opacity of the blurred version, and again we're going to come down. You can make it really rather ethereal by leaving the blur quite high. If you want a more realistic sort of real feel to it, somewhere in the 20s or 30s work, and I'm quite happy with that. But what I'm disappointed about is that my bridge is somewhat out of focus. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to push the opacity back for this image, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a layer mask and essentially mask out the out of focus part for the bridge. So what I'm going to do is here I'm going to add a layer mask. I'm going to select the brush. I'm going to select the brush tool here. And you can see I can just paint the bridge so I can see that better. Now, of course, that looks awful, but when we bring the opacity of the out of focus layer down, it will sort of disappear into the mix. Just want the top of that bridge in focus. So now, when I reduce the opacity, the bridge is still sharply in focus, and you can have a really ethereal image, but the bridge is in focus, or somewhere close to here, so you just get a slight feel of that glow into your picture, but it still is nice and sharp. So we're going to save that back into Lightroom. And you can see by toggling between the two images, the original one now, which is an attractive image, doesn't feel quite as nice as the one that has the Orton effect. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you have, please consider subscribing and tick the bell icon, and I hope that you'll come back another time to this channel. Thanks very much for watching. See you next time.